With great joy and pleasure, I'm here to introduce Erin and Will, who are two of my most favorite teachers. Let me start by saying every teacher is a favorite teacher, but these two are my favorite teachers. Will Hornblower teaches high school history at Oak Grove School, as well as serving as the student education coordinator. Next year, he'll be taking on the role of Dean of Studies at Oak Grove, coordinating the school's academic initiatives and curricular development. He received his BA in History and Latin American Studies from the University of Chicago and his Master's in Education and Teaching credential from UC Santa Barbara. He has been teaching at Oak Grove School since 2011. Gardner teaches middle school humanities and high school poetry performance and composition classes at Oak Grove. He also coaches the school's Condor League champion basketball team. He received his BA in English from University of California, Berkeley, and his teaching credential from CSU East Bay. He has been teaching at Oak Grove since 2016. Will and Erin, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to start by first thanking Deepa, who is our collective favorite parent. Okay. Check. I think it's just not there. We are now. It's so I'll say that again. Deepa, who is our favorite collective parent at this school. Thank you for that introduction. We're going to start by being teachers and asking you to do something. So I would like you all to imagine that you're given 10 days free from the constraints of your jobs, of your families, of anything that's occupying your time and interest right now, to do something, anything at all. And during those 10 days, the only constraints are that the thing you choose must be challenging to you. It must help you find purpose in your life, and it must give back to the community in some way. Think about that for 1 minute. That's all you get, 1 minute. What would you do during those 10 days of complete freedom? All right. I didn't realize how awkward it would be to sit up here for 1 minute in silence while you guys did that. However, what I'd like you to do next is turn to somebody nearby, behind you, next to you, wherever, and share. What is that thing? What is that thing that you would do if you had 10 days? Please do that now. Give him another minute.
Yeah, it keeps on falling off. I think I can just do it, just adjust it, yeah. There we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, I feel like I can just, okay, you got it. Cool.
You've got about 20 seconds to finish your thought. And I appreciate you participating in the activity. If you could finish your thought and bring your attention back. And what I would like to do next, once your attention is back this way. Thank you. In your conversations, I would like to hear from, I'll repeat it because I have the microphone and you do not. I would like to hear from a few people what came up. What is one of the things that, and please just raise a hand. This is a classroom, by the way. So please just raise your hand if you have an idea that came up. Sure, in the back. And speak fairly loudly so I can hear.
To go to Tibet, which would be a big challenge because of the altitude, and I would do my Reiki on the
Awesome. I heard to go to Tibet, which would be a big challenge because of elevation, and to practice Reiki in Tibet. Be brave. Meredy.
I would do a vision quest, which is a Native American tradition of fasting out in the wilderness solo, and then I would try to find ways to make something like that available to teenagers.
The response was to do a vision quest, which is fasting out in nature solo, and find a way to bring that back to teenagers. Thank you.
Where we live, like most places in California, there's a pretty sizable homeless community. I thought, go and see what it'd be like to live homeless for 2 days. See if I could figure out how to really make that a possibility. I was living on the streets and see what that was like.
The response was because of the sizable homeless population in California, to try to go and live for 10 days as an unhoused person and see what that would be like. Thank you for those responses. And the follow-up to that is, before you responded, what was your first reaction to the question? Where you were given unbridled freedom. There's 3 constraints on the board, yeah. But you were given unbridled freedom to think of anything. What first came up for you? What were the first feelings that you had before you started thinking of what that might be? Was it anxiety? Was it elation? What was it? If you have one, please share. Relaxation. Tears. Standing still.
How to choose.
How to choose. Absolutely. All these things come up when we are given the ability to choose, but also possibly paralyzed by the choice itself. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is that freedom. My name is Aaron. There's me and my child. And as Deepa said, I'm a middle school teacher here at Oak Grove School. I teach humanities, English, and history, and have been here since 2016. Yeah.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay? Is my mic working? My name is Madonna because I'm wearing the Madonna mic, but actually my name is Will. So I do a couple things here. I teach high school history. I help to advise our juniors in the high school. And I also work with our parent population, helping to coordinate our parent education program. So as Deepa said, next year I'm embarking on a big journey to become the Dean of Studies at the school, which means I'll take a more active role in helping to shape the curriculum from pre-K through 12th grade, which is really exciting because we're doing so many cool things at this school. And we're going to share one cool thing today. But I want to talk about two reasons why I got into education in general and why I love Oak Grove. The first, and I say this all the time, is like, this is me. I don't wear a mask at this school. I get to be here and I get to share with students in a sort of way that's authentic to who I am and to what I believe as a teacher. And that's such a wonderful and liberating place to be when you're in the field of education. And the second, I want to share a quote from one of my heroes, Mr. Paulo Freire, the great Brazilian educator. And he says this. He says, "My role as a progressive teacher is not only that of teaching mathematics or biology, but also of helping students to recognize themselves as the architects of their own cognition." So I think as we reflect on the theme today and as we reflect on just where you are at, you guys got to be students for a second, of always going back to that way of considering, how does it make us feel? What are we thinking about? And that's what we're going to explore today. All right. So let me read a quote from Krishnamurti. "This is the world the young people have to face, and naturally, they are really frightened. They have an idea that they should be free, independent of routine, should not be dominated by their elders, and they shy away from all authority. Freedom to them means to choose what they want to do, but they are confused, uncertain, and want to be shown what they should do. The student is caught between his own desire for freedom to do what he wants and society's demands for conformity to its own necessities, that people become engineers, scientists, soldiers, or specialists of some kind. This is the world students have to face and become a part of through their education. It is a frightening world. We all want security, physically as well as emotionally, and having this is becoming more and more difficult and painful." So I want to jump to one piece of this, and I want you to put yourself in the context of these students. The student is caught between his own desire for freedom to do what he wants and society's demands for conformity to its own necessities, that people become engineers, scientists, soldiers, or specialists of some kind. And now I want you to think about what these students are students. Some of you may be parents or in education, but I want you to think about some of the pressures these students are facing. Think about this. Where am I going to go to college? How smart am I? This test tells me how smart I am. How am I going to look to all those people who want to know what I look like and want to follow my every move online? And then finally, am I smarter than a machine? Or should I have a machine think for me? This is going through their heads right now. This is the pressure that they face. And it's really tough. And so one role that we take as teachers at this school, and a role that we take very seriously, is to help center themselves in this situation. Help them find a place where they can be here, be present, be aware of all of this, but also learn in a way that's not impeded by these same factors.
And so one of the things that we do is we focus on transitions in these children's lives. And two of those main transitions happen to be the places that we teach at. One, mine in middle school in 8th grade, and Will in his history classes in 12th grade leading these projects. And as at these times, these are natural transition times because one is an adolescent coming from childhood into young adulthood who's questioning, well, everything. They're middle school students, so they're questioning everything. But mostly they're questioning, is this for me? Is education for me? Am I here to be a learner? Who am I? It's all about identity, autonomy, and figuring themselves out. And then in 12th grade, they're leaving their young adulthood behind and becoming adults, going out into the world, making huge decisions around college and career, and yeah, adulting. That's what's happening in 12th grade. So we chose these times because they're natural, but because also that's where the challenge lies. Like if you need to lean into those challenges and basically come up with who you are and why you're here. And that's why we came up with these two projects. And in 8th grade, we have the Into the Wild project, which is a nine-month project, basically given the same constraints that you were just given to work on your own for the entire year. And in 12th grade, it's the Pathless project, which is shorter but more intense over a period. Is it 10 days?
They get 10 full days. So imagine just what you got, where you are sent out. You might be here, you might be at home, you might be off-site, but 10 full days of freedom to do exactly what you want to do. And we'll get more into that in a second here.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's talk for a second. We kind of went over this a little bit, but I want to talk about some of the philosophical and pedagogical underpinnings of the project, because there's a lot, as you guys know, in education, we talk about the term scaffolding. And there's a lot that we do when we work with these students to put them in a frame of mind to truly explore and to delve deeply when they do these projects. So the first thing I want to delve into is this idea of purpose. And I want to talk about a little bit about how we frame it with the students. So let's go ahead in there. We start with the great Viktor Frankl. And many of you guys might be familiar with his story. He's a psychologist, an Austrian psychologist, who was given this choice. He was living in Austria as the sort of Nazis were taking control. He had to choose whether he would take a job in America, good job, tenured professor, or whether he would remain and likely end up in the concentration camps. And he chose to remain, and the reason he chose to remain was because he felt like living a meaningful life was more important than living a life where we're sort of just pursuing what we deem as success or happiness. He sort of took this and went into this idea that the meaning itself is what distinguishes, our search for meaning is what distinguishes ourselves as human beings, but also that's such an intrinsic drive. And we see this with young people. We see them constantly asking themselves, what am I doing here? It is so fun to teach existentialism to a 12th grader, let me tell you, because they are thinking that every day. And then we, of course, jump into Krishnamurti. And I love this quote. So what is the ultimate reason or purpose for human existence? I imagine he was asked this many times. And he says this, right? He says, do you know any purposes? The way we live has no meaning and no purpose. We can invent a purpose, the purpose of perfection, enlightenment, reaching the highest form of sensitivity. We can invent endless theories, and we are caught in those theories, making them our problems. Our daily life has no meaning, no purpose, except to make a bit of money and lead an idiotic kind of life. Yet through the illusion, through what is, through the measurable, you can find something that is immeasurable. You must begin with yourself, where you can discover for yourself how to look. So that question of turning inward is so important. And how, in designing these projects, one of the things we always ask is, how are they constantly reflecting on where they are? How are they situating themselves in the journey and not necessarily in the destination? How are they aware that where they are right now in life, it's just a place. And to find meaning, again, you have to look inward. You have to ask yourself, well, what am I doing right now? So one thing I love, they're always like, wow, that's a lot of, big ideas, right? But is it really important to know, to have a sense of purpose? And yes, it is. So there's research. There's a man named William Damon who's done a lot of research into purpose. And he basically says, like, if you don't have a direction in your life, if you don't feel a sense of meaning, you will end up in this sort of drift. And we as young people might have felt this drift at times. We might feel this drift right now. But it is associated with all sorts of, psychosocial, psychosomatic ailments. So how can we, again, as teachers, help these students not drift, not fall into this? And Damon's research is great too, because it says if you can help them find a sense of purpose, there's all these pro-social benefits that come from that. So anyway, that's a big ask for a teacher to help someone find a sense of purpose, but we're working for it. We're trying for it.
Yeah, and also thinking about middle schoolers, trying to ask a middle schooler to come up with what is their purpose in life is a huge ask, because middle schoolers are thinking about what's important to their friends, and what's important to them right then might be Cheetos. So it's not like, it's a really, really deep question that we're asking. And then along with purpose is challenge. With that ChatGPT question that just came up, the question of, should I even put effort into it if there's a machine that is already smarter than I am? Smarter. That question comes into these projects as well. How do you find something that's actually challenging for you? As a middle school teacher for the last 20 years, I can tell you there's two camps of students. There's the camp of students who's the vast majority of students that think, I will do this because I'm good at it already, right? They want to be able to just start something because they're already good at it. Whether that's athletics or writing or reading, there's an idea that you've already just been good at something, so you can. That's the only thing that I want to try. That failure is too hard, it's too painful, and all of those things. And here at Oak Grove, we all, from the beginning, from kindergarten or preschool all the way up, growth mindset is a huge part of what we bring into these for students, to try to think about what that means to challenge yourself. That challenge should be a normal, everyday part of your life. So we turn to Carol Dweck here, a Stanford professor and author who talks about fixed versus growth mindset. And you can see when you have a fixed mindset, that's that first camp. That I will do something because I'm good at it. I'm not going to do something because I know I'm going to be bad at it. There's not an attempt because there's a worry of failure. And with growth mindset comes the idea that failure is a part of a process. That you're looking for, each thing that you're doing is looking to build new skills, is to set you further along a path towards somewhere. And that's kind of what we're looking to do with these projects, is to help them kind of scaffold their way through having a growth mindset with something that matters to them. So it's not something that we've chosen for them, not something that we're saying you need to be good at this or whatever. It's just something that they're choosing to do. So a couple quotes from Carol Dweck. First, why seek out the tried and true instead of experiences that will stretch you? And that is the question that we ask first with both of these projects. Why do something that you're already good at for this thing, right? Yeah, there's lots of time to practice the things that you're already good at, and lots of times to experience the joy that comes from being good at something. But for this, let's try. Let's see what happens when you stretch that. And secondly, in a growth mindset, challenges are exciting rather than threatening. And that, I mean, I can see it as I work with high schoolers now too, that's a little easier for high schoolers to embrace. It's a little harder for middle schoolers who are trying to fit so neatly into the box of their peers and the people around them. How do you look at challenge as exciting rather than threatening your autonomy, threatening your place in the classroom and society and all those things? It's a really difficult ask. But rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to reveal my weaknesses, you say, oh, this is actually a chance to grow. And I think when you offer everybody the same opportunity to do that, the ability to look at each other and say, because they're all looking at each other's projects too, and say, oh, that worked really well, or that didn't work at all. What are you going to do next time is an interesting idea.
And I'm going to add one more thing before we jump into the last theme of the project, but just this student come to me in tears, and he's one of my, he's just such a good person, and he just comes to me and he's like, Will, this is so hard. And I'm like, and I just smiled and I was like, yeah, it is. It's so hard, and how does that feel? And he paused and he's sort of like, actually it feels kind of good. Like it feels in a way that to truly put yourself out there and challenge yourself in this environment where we're always, where kids are always looking for the path of least resistance, to ask them to actually stretch themselves. It feels good. And we came away laughing, both of us, so that was great. So let me just jump into the last theme of our projects here, which is kind of thinking about the greater good, right? We ask in these projects, and I think again in the sense of the freedom to say, oh yeah, your project needs to give back in some ways. It is a limited thing. You start to think, well, what does giving back look like? What does contributing to the greater good look like? So the way I like to frame it is again this juxtaposition of happiness versus meaning, happiness versus dedicating yourself to something larger than your own self-interest. And sometimes in class we'll discuss this sort of concept of the hedonic treadmill. This idea that if you're chasing happiness, you're never going to get there. You're always just riding that treadmill, trying to reach some achievable goal, and you say, wow, I made $1 million this year, but ultimately that becomes your baseline, and you're like, it would be pretty nice to make $2 million this year. And so how do you move beyond that? How do you center yourself in a place where you derive meaning not from your own sort of very subjective feeling of happiness, but a larger idea that like what I do, what I put into the world is contributing. It is building the world, is contributing to the greater good. And again, we'll turn to Krishnamurti. And he says this. He says, as an individual, it's your responsibility to bring about a tremendous change in the world. It is your responsibility because you are part of this society, because you are a part of this tremendous sorrow of man, this constant effort, struggle, pain, and anxiety. You are responsible. Unless you realize that immense responsibility and come directly in contact with that responsibility and listen to the whole structure, the machinery of that responsibility, do what you will. Go to every temple, to every guru, to every master, to every religious book in the world. your action has no meaning whatsoever.
So I think we're going to get into now what these projects look like. I said that every single part of these three things, the responsibility part, the purpose part, the challenge part, I said each one was the most difficult for middle school students, and it's true. They're all super difficult. When you think about responsibility in this way, knowing, and anybody that's been around a middle school student knows that middle school students believe that the world revolves around them, that they are the center of everything. And so to ask somebody whose brain has not quite reached the place of putting themselves into the world, to ask them to do that for a project, that's a big ask. And I think that when you have a project like this, just as you all said, there's some anxiety that comes into being asked to do anything. There's some relaxation that comes into it. There's some stillness that comes into it, and there's some fear that comes into it as well. So we don't just say choose anything and then let it go, and then that's it, and there they are. There's no way that would ever work in any world. So there has to be structure to it. And that becomes the biggest question is, how do you offer freedom with structure? How does that happen? How do you ask a child to come up with anything they want, but still give them the tools to actually know how to do that, actually know how to identify what they want in a way that's challenging and productive? How do they even go about that at all? And so that was kind of the beginnings of this thing. When we were thinking about it, actually Meredy took me down to Wildwood School, and we saw a similar project, and it kind of made me think about just what I'm able to do as a teacher at all the abilities that I have to allow for freedom within structure and so on and so forth. So I have a thing that I've written that I'd like to kind of try to read through, because I'm finding myself speaking from the top of my head is a little bit difficult sometimes. So I'm going to read a little bit of this and get into the project, and you can see I have some examples of what we've been doing in middle school, and we'll have some examples from the high school, so you can see a little bit more about the nitty-gritty of these projects. All right, so here we go. As I stood across the table from an 8th grade girl, her eyes were sparkling as she recounted how she submitted a successful proposal and implemented a plan to include junior high artists in one of the largest high school art shows in the city. She proudly recounted partnering with a charity that connected artists in impoverished countries with the same art show to raise money for them as well. She was thoughtful about all of my questions and thorough in her passionate answers, and the same went for student after student after student. The boy who built his own bike from scratch, the girl who created a line of lip balms to sell, the student who created a stand-up comedy routine and performed it at adult comedy open mics. The common thread that linked all these projects together, though, was that students had come up with the idea themselves, they had found a mentor, they had documented their progress, and they designed the project all on their own. And the entire room was filled with a palpable sense of pride and motivation stemming from their own interests. And this is the Into the Wild project that we've been doing for the last, 5 years. So junior high students are a paradox. They are full of the desire to push against boundaries and test new ideas, while at the same time feeling an intense need to find belonging within a group. And we see it in all the choices that they make, in their music, in their fashion, in their friendships, and in basically every area of their lives. It's a weird way of like, I need to be me, but I need to be the group also. I need to somehow be both at the same time. So because it's happening in their lives all the time, we could naturally expect that it would happen in the classroom as well. And I think that that's actually the most exciting thing about being a teacher, is seeing students break through that and design their own solutions to something that's being presented, design their own resolution to a problem or their own way to approach something. And it could be as simple as tweaking a writing prompt. So instead of saying whatever the prompt that I've brought in. Maybe they want to write about the societal reason why there's no girls in Lord of the Flies. Maybe they don't want to write about the themes. Maybe it's more involved. Like instead of making a reading log, I want to make my own book review website. And the student wants to be part of this goal that's been set in the classroom for each of these assignments, but they want to stand out also. They want to have a personal signature on it. They want it to be their own. And in my previous experience as a teacher, I taught in large public schools before I came to Oak Grove, and I found myself in the same sort of problem, the same conundrum all of the time. How do you foster a sense of individuality and exploration in an environment that's dictated by conformity, not only by the school itself, but by the students, by their need to conform? And most of the time it was really frustrating. You can see small moments of expression, small little signs in their writing, in their speaking, in the things that they choose. But anything that challenges the structure of curriculum or the structure of an assignment is going to come up against the wall of common assessment or testing or, even grades. And I found myself saying no way more often than saying yes. And I think that teaching humanities here at Oak Grove has given me a bit of a gift, and that gift is that I can say yes a lot. Sometimes too much, but a lot. The small sizes of our classes and the commitment to inquiry that we have here, they allow for small scale and large scale opportunities for students to lead their own design thinking and their own problem solving, which can work really well. And it can also be terrible when you think about things like conflict resolution and you have a bunch of middle schoolers trying to figure out how to solve problems on their own. So we've had to figure out ways, this is just not just in these projects, but in their lives, to structure that freedom, to help them do it on their own with a little help. So I don't have to now, in my current position, I don't have to ask students to form their own learning all the time. Every student has the opportunity to inform their own learning as they grow their strengths and their interests. And I kind of was trying to find a way, how do I, now that I have this freedom, not just them, how do I encourage them to use the freedom and the motivations that they have to actually make something, to do something, to put it into action? And when we redesigned our advisory to include the teacher, the homeroom teacher, as the person that's leading advisory, it gave me an opportunity to put the project together and to see how it would go. So basically we meshed a whole bunch of things together, and we have an internship program already where they work with somebody in the community towards something they're interested in pursuing as a career, and kind of turned that into a way to look at the mentorship program. And I also can, because I'm their own advisor, I can work closely with each child to help them along the way navigate the challenges and opportunities that their interest presents. So the most important thing that happens, though, is students are basically allowed to pursue this thing without a perceived boundary. The boundaries are things that they create themselves. And they can try something large or small or anything, and they can fail and retry in an environment that's safe and supportive. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we were talking about this earlier, that here, Oak Grove, I think we all can agree that this is one of the safest places that you can fail. If you fail at something, there's a huge community of people that are there to hold you through that failure and to help you understand and reflect on the failure and to see it not just as a failure, but as something that is guiding you towards something else. So yeah, it's a very, I don't know how to explain it other than safe. It's a very safe place to experience that. Okay. Here's my Krishnamurti quote. While one is young, it's time to investigate and experiment with everything. The school should help its young people discover their vocations and responsibilities and not merely cram their minds with facts and technical knowledge. It should be the soil in which they can grow without fear, happily and integrally. I'm always really excited to see what these 8th graders come up with in their projects as they explore their interests, whatever form it is. As a teacher, one of the hardest things that I have to do is to divorce myself from the outcome that a student's project might be. The outcome in this project is simply not as important as the process itself. It's not as important as the investigation of an interest. It's not important how fleeting that interest is. It's the process itself is paramount. That being said, there has to be accountability along the way, or else we're just spinning wheels. So we have a process with this Into the Wild project. The first thing that they do is they have to consider some questions that go into their they go into this project. This is before they even come up with their ideas at all. And so those questions are these. Does my project have legs? Will I be able to explore it for an entire school year? Or does it provide opportunities for me to learn along the way? And these are all things that these 8th graders have to consider. Can I do this project on my own? I can't be reliant on someone else, and I need to find my own way around the challenges and the obstacles. Is there somebody that can be a mentor for me? So is there an adult that I can turn to that will help me along this way, that will give me expert advice and guidance? And is it challenging enough? Is it something that'll prove that I'm willing to learn something new, to take risks, and to find new paths if I come across a roadblock? The project has to be rigorous. There needs to be things to learn in depth that I don't already know. And if the project is something that I do already know, how can I deepen my expertise? How can I take this deeper? And then finally, how can I connect this Into the Wild project with my community? And so what they do first is they have to come up with a vision board. And each student presents to a panel of their classmates, and sometimes Merity and sometimes some other adults that come into the room. They have to present these 3 ideas, and they do it basically exactly like this. This is one from a student that we had. And so they come up with their 3 ideas, they come to the front of the room and they explain them. First, that this student wanted to do maybe American Sign Language. As you can see, they've been interested in ASL, and they think that the Into the Wild project might be a great time to start it. Or cooking my culture. I really like to know more about the cooking on my mom's side of the family, which is South American or Mexican food. I've always liked cooking, so this would be really fun for me. And finally, nature photography. This is my favorite explanation. I tried to have photography at my apprenticeship last year, but it didn't work. So maybe now I can explore this subject more. I kind of know how a camera works, but I don't know what the buttons do. So these are all 3 possibilities for a project. And then the students receive feedback from their peers. Their peers say, that camera one doesn't look like you were that interested in it. Are you sure that that's something that you really want to do for 9 months? Or, cooking. How can you make cooking stretch for 9 months? Are you going to cook a different meal all the time? So they're asking questions to each other. And I'm also asking questions along the way to help them try to figure it out. Once they've found their project through that, then they go into a process of accountability. So they have to first the very first thing they do is create a blog. Here's an example of a blog that's up there. So this kind of keeps them through the 9 months, adding what's going on. Sometimes it's a reflection, sometimes it's an inquiry question, sometimes it's an interview with a mentor or a field trip that they've designed. But each step of the way, there's something that they're being held to. And then this year we did a new thing where we included a panel of adults that they had to present their findings and their process to about halfway through the project. So they had to sit down individually with a group of 3 adults, which can be a pretty scary thing for a middle school student to do, and talk about where they're at and where they think they're going to end up by the end of this project. And they come up with really beautiful things. I mean, the projects that have been done over the past 5 years, I have a ton of them up here. I'll just go through some of them. Here we go. So we've got building a racing drone, making a documentary on homelessness in Ventura County, performing a stand-up comedy set, designing and marketing a clothing brand. There's a senior this year who did this in their 8th grade year, and they have a full brand that they sell out of Los Angeles, and they're going to Parsons, right? Mm-hmm. Going to Parsons School of Design. It's something, this project triggered something within this student to help to like show them where they want to go. It's kind of like, it was a really, really interesting one. Growing a vegetable garden for soup. This one has particular importance to me because it was one of the worst mistakes I ever made as a teacher. This student really did grow an entire garden of vegetables, create this beautiful vegetable soup that they brought to share with all the students, and I knocked the crock pot over on the day of presentation. The whole soup was on the floor. Luckily, the students were all very, very welcoming to the whole situation, and they called it floor soup, and we all just had floor soup, and we all tried it anyway. But it was a tough one for me. Another one is creating a series of training videos for soccer that they put on YouTube, and then some students were able to use them. The chemistry of explosions, which was interesting. Upcycling for my own wardrobe. The history of the B word through theater, which was a fabulous one. Cooking across cultures, designing a board game about cooperation instead of competition. I can't read my own one. Designing and shaping a surfboard, making sustainable and affordable perfumes, baking the perfect macaron, painting a mural, which I still have on my wall today that was done the first year that I did this project, recording an album of original songs, and learning to DJ and DJing their own middle school dance, which was a pretty cool one too. So you can see, street photography. There's a myriad of things that students can try and explore. These actually are going to be presented on next Monday, on the 15th this year here. And what happens when you go to these presentations is that you see students that are all over the spectrum of where they got to. What is the product that they present might be something that's to you as an adult watching it fabulous, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. And some of those things might be, you're like, what did you do with 9 months? What in the world is going on here? And the beautiful thing about it is that they've all reflected on that. I have a student right now who came to me on Thursday and said, Aaron, I need to change my project. And I said, you have a week. What's going on here? And this student was telling me, I really didn't spend my time wisely. I had a mentor, that person fell through, and all the stuff I was trying to do with interior design, which was what this student's idea was, just kept failing and failing and failing. And so we had to sit and have a conversation about what are we going to do here? And she said, I've been doing another project on the side. Is there a way that I can bring that in? And so we had to think about that. And part of that goes into this reflection, and that they present that. They have to present these failures and talk about what happens when that happens. What happens when your interest in one thing either falls apart or wanes or changes? What do you do? Do you give up? Do you present something new? Do you start over in a week? These are all options for this kid, and she has to try to figure out where she's going to go from it. Obviously, with my support there, and we're gonna explore this idea that she's had now, this secondary idea, but it's going to be a challenge for her, which is, I think, the beauty of the project, is that you get to see what that looks like. So many times in a classroom, a student's interests are just dismissed as a distraction, as something that's apart from their learning. Is secondary to the real learning that's supposed to be there. And I kind of hope with this project, these 8th graders can see that these extracurricular avocations and interests can be held with the same weight as the construction of a good essay or the understanding of a difficult concept. And I'll leave you with the final Krishnamurti quote. He describes the process of distraction as follow the wandering, follow the distraction, Find out why the mind has wandered, pursue it, go into it fully. And when the distraction is completely understood, then that particular distraction is gone. And when another comes, pursue it also.
Right. So I'm going to talk briefly just, many elements of the 12th grade project are the same as the 8th grade project. And so much to the extent that I occasionally have a 12th grader who tries to slide in their 8th grade project as their 12th grade project. And I'm like, this looks kind of juvenile. But I just want to talk a little bit about the genesis of the name and how it reflects the project. If you're familiar with progressive schools, there's the senior project is not an uncommon idea. There's this period right after they get into college and before they leave the school where all of a sudden the traditional academic pursuits are less attractive, to put it mildly. And we call this senioritis or senior spring. And I always share, because I have the privilege of working with the high schoolers for 4 years. I teach them from 9th through 12th grade. And I say, I'm always like, I get to see you at the peak of your, academic existence and then also at the low of your academic existence. But with the senior projects, what I think to distinguish where we are, what's different about Oak Grove, and I think we use this sort of punny name to distinguish our project because of the freedom that they are offered. Some schools will kind of direct students towards senior projects that are very academically driven. Other schools might go more the internship model where it's like, well, this is a great time for you to prepare for your career. Other schools might push students specifically towards service or service learning. And we don't really ask for them to push into one specific area. It's more about their autonomy and them recognizing within themselves, where do they want to explore right now? Aaron read that wonderful piece about distraction. What are you distracted by right now? Where would you like to just spend a little time in your life inquiring? So we also go through the same preliminary design phase where they usually start with senior year, it's more like they start way up here, like, I'm going to design a car. And you're like, okay, wow, I know that takes a long time. Oh, I can do it. I could do it in like a week. It's like, all right. So we start to narrow that down to maybe a more realistic expectation. Or the more senioritis thing of being like, I think I'm going to choreograph a new dance. It's like, wait, I know you just were in a competition where you choreographed a new dance. Is that a big stretch for you? It seems like you do this all the time. And to sort of push them again into that realm of challenge, but also more of a realistic realm. The other thing I love about this project is we make them pitch it in a really scary way. We get all the bigwigs, right? We get Jody, our head of school, Merity, our director of teaching and learning, a lot of the sort of serious faces, and we put them in a room and we put on our serious faces and we're like, give us your elevator pitch. And they have to pitch these projects. And we even do the thing where they look to us to like, oh, how did that go? And we're like, we'll let you know. And it's so great to have them have this high stakes experience. And we do. Some of the kids, we say, you know what? You got to go back to the drawing board. There's some great ideas in there, but we need more. But it's what a wonderful opportunity for them, again, to get that opportunity. Many of you guys in the corporate world have to do this all the time, where you have to go in front of a bunch of scary faces and present your ideas and then have them go, we'll think about that. But to do it in a safe place, to let them hear that. The other thing I love in this project is we again go through a process of mentorship, but we also do some inquiry too. It's like, do some research. What do you want to learn more about? Let's give some space within the project to just to look into it. Some of the kids might use that space to like, oh, what does a career look like in this field? Other ones might look into sort of, like I have a student right now who's, his project is to build an adult-sized swing set for the high school. He's going to engineer it and build it. And so his research is sort of like, why do high school students also need to swing on swings? Which there's a lot of cool research about that. So it's fun to delve with them in there. So finally, they have 10 days, 10 full days off to do this project. And then they return to campus for a process of self-reflection. That's great to, again, have them live within the moment, to reflect on how it felt to do something so open-ended. For those of you guys who would love to hear more about these projects, at the end of the year, starting, I believe, on Friday, June 2nd, we have something called Gateway Presentations in the high school, where our seniors basically spend about half an hour just talking about their growth as learners at Oak Grove School, talking about the places where they've struggled, the places where they've excelled. They look at it through the lens of what we call our arts of living and learning. And they also share out their experiences in these projects. And it is all about the journey, right? We ask them to document this journey, document the changes. And I always tell them, like, it doesn't matter what you came up with, right? It's about how you got back to those questions of challenge and meaning. And how did you feel like you contributed something to the community? So just briefly, I'll go through some of the ones that these guys are doing this year. There's an absolutely awesome typo on here. I'll let you guys see it when it comes up there. But we have a student who arranged a whole choral arrangement to the song Rivers and Roads. And she got some of her friends who are singers to sing it, and she's building a music video. A student is creating a booklet on art, of art and poetry around trauma and death and grief. The swing set guy, awesome. A chess tournament, valley-wide. An e-commerce website for a different student's fashion brand, but also mentoring aspiring students, some of the 8th graders who are trying to become fashion entrepreneurs. Automotive design, maybe not a whole car, but let's teach kids about aerodynamics. Let's explore that. Let's build a wind tunnel. That sounds fun. This is the one where it's like way above my head, but I'm so glad this student's going with it. Our calculus textbook is incomplete. There's not enough about proofs. I need to write my own chapter. Go for it. And I looked at the chapter and I was like, you went for it. This is amazing. So if anyone wants to attend a calculus class to learn more about proofs and to read a chapter, wonderful. All right, a dance routine. Yes, let's do it, but let's delve personally. Let's go more deeply about your family, about your home. No, it is not a formal meal where each course represents a stash, which is a mustache, where each course represents a story about the student's life. A concert production for charity. A whole deal, 3 different bands playing. Let's put it on. Let's publicize it. Let's do it. Let's put together a piano medley of different songs and reflections about a journey from China to America, then being stuck back in China during COVID, and then coming back here. Let's do that. So this is just this year. I mean, we have so much diversity in these projects, and I love it. Okay, let me finish with one of my favorite spots on campus. Hopefully, for those of you guys who are new to Oak Grove, you spent a little time wandering our campus. It's gorgeous. I could hang out here all the time. Oh, wait, I do hang out here all the time, sorry. But there's this maze. There's this little rock maze that's just right out here. And it's like a magnet for students, all ages. You see the little kids, and they're like jumping from rock to rock to rock to rock. And you see the older students, and they often use it as sort of a walking meditation. See them just walking by themselves, following the path to the middle. And I look at this spot, and I wonder, why is it a magnet for a student? Why is it so attractive? And I was thinking about it, and I think part of it is that it's a maze, yeah, but you can see the end. You can stand outside of it, and you can see the start, and you can see the finish. You know where you're going. You know which turns you need to take. It's a really easy maze. And to return back to that theme of, like, what does it feel like to be at the transition, where you feel like every choice matters, where every moment that every little step you take is going to have some vast impact on your life. How comforting is it to just stare at this little maze and be like, I know how to beat this one. I know how to get there. But then, because kids are kids, you see them and they go to this maze, and sure, they might solve it the first time, but then they go back and they're like, maybe I'm going to try doing it this time, but just jump on this rock and this rock and this rock. Or maybe I'm going to skip through the maze. And you see, like, wow, that's freedom. That is this age also, this age of improvisation. So when we think about this theme of, like, choice and awareness, and how to center kids in that moment where they are aware of just being present in a moment, and where they're in education in a way where they're learning something in the moment, and where it's not always, I need to do this to get into this school, or I need to do this because my friends want me to do this. Like, can we provide a fertile ground for that at this school? And that's what I see lots of teachers in the room, that's what we try to do at this school. So I'll leave you guys with just one more quote from Mr. Freire. Education either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity, or it becomes the practice of freedom, the means by which men and women deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah? Excellent. Wow, I have copious amounts of notes, Will and Erin. But one of the first things that I wanted to actually say is that your poker faces are great. Wow. I would be petrified to, like, present, but also very excited about these projects. We are now ready to take some questions from the audience, and we have a mic right in the middle there. So any questions for Will and Erin?
Don't make us start calling on you. That's
Yeah.
what we do to our students.
We have a question there.
Oh, if you can, please.
Oh, yeah. We could also repeat the question too if that works, but either way.
Hi, it's for the gentleman on the right side.
Thanks.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't capture your name.
Will.
Will. I was just wondering, this educational program that they have, is there an entry level for someone that's past senior, just completed 12th grade?
Mm. You know, we don't have a postgraduate program at the school, but it's an interesting avenue to explore. Like again, we're always looking at models. So, but we don't. But it's funny because some of my alumni, actually, there's one of our alums is right there. He's running the tech stuff, and and I actually went to watch his gateway presentation. And while I was prepping for this, I wanted to embarrass him by throwing himself up on the screen. But it's what we ask at the school is that every single member of our community is a learner. We ask that of the parents of that school, of the alumni, and to bring them back into these conversations is so wonderful to continue that journey of learning.
I would certainly say so, and just as a request, possibly if the school would contemplate that, even if it's a very short period of time of 6 months, because it's that transitional phase. I remember when I was 17 and I had just graduated from high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I did end up enrolling in college, but it just to have that extra space in between there where you're able to just drop into yourself or have someone as a mentor to guide you would I'm sure would be so helpful. And I wasn't planning to say this, but I actually am a parent. I do have a 17-year-old, and he has been, we have been separated. So his dad has been pretty much raising him, and so his dad has had influence. It's a long story, but anyway, I have had not too much influence as far as even his education. And so I know that we're planning to sort of reunite in another year or so, and he would have, at that time, in another year, graduate. And I know that he's looking for direction and for feedback from me. So that's why I did ask that question, once they completed with high school, whether there was a program, even if it was short, to still be able to not just give the guidance, but like I said, that influence that a parent has is so important for children, because their parents influence them, and then society has that, influence on them also. So having this organization that's somewhat neutral in a way would lend that help where they are able to make their own conscientious decision.
What a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, my suggestion or question, however you call it, actually turns out to be something parallel to what you just heard. And that is do you take a postgraduate survey, say 5 or 10 years after they graduate, with either some reference to the projects that they do, or without that? I don't know if all Krishnamurti schools have projects or not, because I did have, in going to college, I had 2 students who were Krishnamurti graduates from Rishi Valley, and they definitely stood out in one way, that in our class, that everyone had a lot of anxiety especially in IIT where I went, it was a very stressful time. They stood out for not being very stressed out. And that was one. I also had a student who was not a graduate, but maybe you might call a middle school graduate, who came to Sacred Heart School from Rishi Valley. And he too. So I would be interested in knowing how your structured freedom program works out in both guiding students for a career as well as keeping the grounding in Krishnamurti alive. So.
It's interesting. I think we have such a close community that we do know what our graduates are up to 5 years, 10 years down the road. I just got a text message yesterday from a parent who her daughter was speaking at doing this big speech. She's up at a podium, and it's for the Honor Society at Cal. And she's like, my heart is in my throat right now, but my daughter is just fine. And she was just so thankful of that space that we provided to let her grow up in a way that, and I don't want to say I'm cherry picking here, because I think students have lots of different life experiences, but what you mentioned about anxiety and about facing the future, I would like to say that our graduates do land on their feet more often than not when it comes to that. And it's pretty neat to see. I think these projects, sometimes they do lend themselves to a sense of direction and purpose in life. To pick back on Sycamore, who's right there, who's running the tech at this presentation. Do you know what his Pathless project was? It was to explore outreach and social media. It was to look at how to build a brand and doing branding in the Ojai Valley. And then I see him, and he's emailing me like, send me your PowerPoint, do this. And I'm like, whoa, wow, he's doing it. He found something that has meaning to him. And so that's what I would love to see. But I think, again, we also have students who are always on a journey. Yeah.
Question: how does the school deal with violence? Not only violence in ourselves, but especially gun violence in this country, which is the first cause of deaths of children today. And I think that's part of changing society. So my question is, how is Oak Grove School dealing with that? With the fear of children, of gun violence, and understanding their own violence and violence in society. Thank you.
Well, I can speak to that a little bit. In the middle school, we had a beginning of the year. One of the questions that I asked was, what is one of your biggest fears? And the overwhelming response is what you just said, that there's of gun violence in the United States, of like, these are 13 and 14 year olds. What do I have to worry about? How do I live my life when I know that around me that this exists? And as a middle school, we've had many councils where we sit and come up with our own ideas. How, as a 13-year-old, how do I look at this problem, this pervasive problem in a country that was founded on a, well, not to get political, there's a there's a question of like, how do you deal with this in a society where guns are pervasive, where it is allowed to have it? And that was a big part of how we were able to become independent as a country. How do you look at this in our society? And they don't have an answer, but we at least explore the question. And I know that students, as school students, have done things like written to the state representatives in California with their own ideas. State representatives in California are required to give a response, and so and a lot of times it's a staff member that's writing that response. But they do respond to these 13 and 14-year-olds who get to at least know that their voices are being heard, that those fears are being heard and looked at by somebody whose job it is to hear the voice of their constituents and put that into action. So there's the question becomes alive, but it is a question. And the second part of that, in terms of like the violence within themselves, how do we look at that? A lot of that is an interesting question for our students, not having to do with gun violence, but having to do with the difference between conflict and violence. Like, what is one of those things is a necessary part of our lives, which is conflict. You can't exist. There can't be peace without conflict. There can't, these two dualities, it seems there's a necessity of one of them, but violence is not a necessity. And so how do we look at the conflict within ourselves and deal with that? And I think that at this school, I mean, from peace bridges all the way up through our councils, we have ways of them looking at that conflict within each other and trying to find ways to deal with it themselves with the structure of an adult that allows them to have different responses than violence. But like, it starts from where is this feeling in me? Where is this feeling coming from? It starts from that. It starts from an inner exploration.
And thank you for that. As a parent, I also can share as to what the school does, because I can testify to the point from when my son started here when he was 10 years old, and he's 17 right now. When we first moved here, and I'll speak to the fear part of it. When we first moved here, everything's going great. 6 months into the school year, he jumps into the car. I say, "Hey, how was your school today?" He goes, "It was great." Then after a few minutes, he says, "I realized I'm not stressed." I'm like, "What do you mean you're not stressed?" He said, "I used to be stressed in my elementary school." And he says, "I'm not stressed here, Amma." I'm like, "Tell me a little bit more about that." He said, "When I come here, we can talk. There's a psychological safety." I'm using that word he didn't use. He said, "There's a space for me to be able to talk, and this school creates conditions for that. Conversations, whether it's about violence, whether it's about anxiety, whether it's about anything." One of the things he's consistently said to me is that I can come here and talk with all the adults in the school, just not my teachers. And that profoundly has impacted how he engages in this world. And the teachers and the staff here model that consistently to all our students. We have another question?
Yes, ma'am. On pleasure and entertain, to be entertained, children, do you have dialogues with them, like with TikTok and Facebook and all that stuff? My grandkids and a lot of the kids, they're really drawn to that TikTok, and we have a hard time getting them off of it, but, just wondered if you had any dialogues with that.
Yeah. It's a societal dialogue. It's a dialogue that we have almost every day with them. We've made a lot of choices to kind of try to create a space on campus where it's not quite technology free, but at least we try to restrict technology use just for academic reasons. Students have to turn in their phones when they get to school. And it's really fun to explore that with them because they're so reactive to that. They're like, this is their whole identity. It's like to give up that piece of your identity and leave it at the door every day. And your whole world, your whole social life, everything, to leave that at the door. You do have to have a lot of conversations about how that feels. And in general, they come around. They feel this sense of like wow, I can be authentic in a way here where I'm not worried constantly about that sort of, and again, I talked about it, I feel authentic here, and I think the students do too, in that way of like, they're not acting for their social media followers. They're not worried about the sort of litany of comments that will come down if they make a mistake or do something that doesn't accord with the kind of like societal expectations of who they are. I just spent 10 days with our juniors. We did a big road trip through the Southwest and visited the national parks, and they didn't get to bring their phones. And they were like, what are we going to do in a car for 9 hours without our phones? And I'm like, I don't know. You guys could talk to each other. You could try that. You could talk to me. And they're like, but then all of a sudden it's like, it's liberating. But I think you also have to have those conversations. That is not the world we live in. And so there's a piece too of being, just living to, again, to go back to what we're always doing at this school is we're trying to be aware. We're trying to understand what is happening in the world in a way where we recognize that. And we recognize all those pressures that social media puts on us. I'm sorry I can't give you advice on how to get your grandchildren off social media.
Hi, I really enjoyed your presentation. I used to teach at the Rajgat School in India, and they had a class called Culture Class. And I wondered if you have anything like that here. It sounds like already the whole atmosphere is basically the spirit of Culture Class, but I really found it was a really good forum for students to explore conditioning in society, conditioning in the school itself, within themselves, and how all those things interrelate, related to violence, related to social problems. So I was curious if you have a space like that here.
I think it's embedded. I think that all of our classes and all of our teachers kind of approach it like that. I know in the middle school we spend a ton of time talking about this thing called the single story, which is that as somebody is presenting information, that's one side of it, and that you have to look at, like, you can't just focus on that, or else you're only being shown one side. And it comes about in the study of Africa in middle school, but it applies to everything that we do. So it ends up being kind of embedded and talked about through every single unit. I know that it's the same thing in science class in the middle school, and in my own children's classes in the elementary school. That's a huge part of what they're talking about constantly. So I think it's more of an ideology, or not, that's the wrong word. It's more of an embedded way of looking at the world and looking at education through all the classes.
Nice. I appreciate that. Thank you.
In the high school, we do a really fun project when they first start. So we study the concept again through, from an anthropological perspective of like, what is culture and what are some elements of culture and acculturation and so forth. And then because they're new to the high school, I asked them to make a documentary film about the culture of Oak Grove. And so they're walking around with cameras trying to capture some of these sort of like, not only explicit elements of the culture of the school, but the implicit elements as well of like, like there's this, we often use this phrase, the plan, which is like a way to get students to try to sort of push them along the right track in terms of what they're doing. But I remember one student did this whole thing, and it's like, what exactly is the plan? Let's find it. And it was just great. It was such a fun way to kind of, again, center them, to help them understand like just even this little microcosm of culture. And then actually our senior class, the class I teach where we do these projects is religion, culture, philosophy, and ethics. And one unit is literally, I just start with like, what do you guys want to talk about? Let's just look into some concepts, whether it is, you know, anti-racism was one year we just focused on that because that's what was part of the zeitgeist. Whether it's you know, this there was a lot of this year in that unit of just processing kind of the post-pandemic reality. Like, what did it feel like to be locked up for a year and then set free again, and how overwhelming that can be. So yeah.
That's really
But I would
powerful.
love to hear more about your class because that sounds awesome.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, it's Anon. He was in disguise.
I come every now and then to substitute for Will and people. And the one thing that always strikes me is the moment I enter the school, I feel a sense of release and quiet and peace and so on. The reason I say this is because I have taught in New York City schools. I've taught in a war-ravaged country for 5 years, which had no electricity, no water supply, and so on. And when I come into class, they have not had education for 25 years, and they all stand up in class, all stand up, because they are so respectful in our part of the society. And I've also taught at Rikers Island for 3 years. And so I see the amazing difference, and I really am grateful that at the tail end of my life, I've come to school where I feel so relaxed to come in and substitute. So I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We just have a few minutes.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
There's some really amazing questions on chat, and I'm so glad you both are answering this and not me. Will and Erin, a big part of case teaching was transcendence from the self-narrative. Are your students aware that the name is not the named?
I would love to ask them that question because I think one of my teachers in education had a whole rap that she had, but the line I remember best from it is, "How do you know that the students know what you want them to know?" Which is like such a part of education. And in this sense of figuring out this idea of the immeasurable, or the unnamed, or even the theme of this choiceless awareness. Do I know that they are aware of this? Do I present them with a series of questions, and do I try to create an educational learning environment and an environment to explore these ideas? I can say, yes, I do that. But do I know? I don't know.
And I'd just say, in terms of watching a student do it or demonstrate that is an interesting question also. We're really involved with noticing here at Oak Grove, noticing without a reaction, noticing noticing the beauty in something and pointing it out without calling it beautiful. And I notice that most in their writing. So when a student writes, for me, a lot of times I'll bring it back to them and say, okay, so you used a lot of qualifying adjectives in this. You called this the most amazing time that you've ever had. That's fine. But for me, when I read that, I'm picturing something different than what you're trying to demonstrate. So how do you just notice what you did? Why don't you just tell me what you did in a way that just explains the instant and lets me draw or not draw my own conclusions from it, rather than you trying to tell us what rather than try to name the experience for me. Explain the experience. Let it be the experience. It's the way that I can see that is through their writing.
Well, thank you for that. That was I think what you've just seen right now is what our students constantly experience through these amazing teachers day in and day out. So we have about 30 seconds, and I think we're good to wrap up. We have a final question, please.
Get the parents involved with programs, the teachings,
Mm.
and the gentleman's question about social media and the things that, because it starts at home, as we all know that, with the parents. So how does the school get the parents involved in the programs and the teachings?
Thank you. I feel like I might have paid you to ask you that. I don't know who you are, but that's like the best question. Thank you, Jason. That's the best question you can possibly ask me. So we have a robust parent education program at Oak Grove. It starts at every age, but it first comes with a call from our head of school, who says, "Hey, this school's a little different," and she's echoing the words of Krishnamurti. At this school, the parents are involved. It's a triangle. It's the parents, it's the teachers, it's the students. We're all in a community of learning. And so as a parent, guess what? You're enrolled in school here too. You may be asked to show up to class. You certainly are going to be asked to be a part of this community. So every couple of weeks, we actually have a formal parent education class. It might be about child development. It might be about some of what we came up today. It might be about social media and how to talk about that with your student. We're doing one in a few weeks where it's career night. Bring your student and bring yourself and explore all of these different pathways and choices that you could think about. But then we also have a series of dialogues that are always happening on campus where we'll look at some of the teachings. And the students are there, the parents are there, the teachers are there. We're all talking together about about what it is to be at a Krishnamurti school. We have, again, if you choose to be a parent at this school, and I am also a parent at this school, it's definitely like an ask, right? You are in the community, you are involved, and you learn a lot. And it's wonderful to kind of play a role in that. So hopefully that answers the question.
It does, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Will and Erin, and thank you to our audience and amazing questions. This was one of the most thought-provoking conversations I've had, and I'm leaving with a lot of questions and a lot of reflective thoughts, and I think that's what you both intended for us to do. Thank you.